good evening, or maybe it's morning where you are. I'm your storyteller, and tonight my mission is simple: to guide you into another world, where your worries fade and sleep comes softly, without you even noticing. Before we begin this journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and what time it is for you. I'd love to know. Now find a comfortable position, close your eyes if you'd like, and let me tell you a story. The rain was relentless that night, a cold, pounding deluge that battered the roof of Emily Harper's small suburban home in upstate New York. At 28, Emily was a graphic designer, fiercely independent, with a penchant for late-night horror podcasts that kept her company in her cozy two-story house. She'd moved here 6 months ago, seeking solitude after a messy breakup, hoping the quiet town of Willow Creek would be her fresh start. But tonight, as the storm raged outside, that solitude felt less like freedom and more like a trap. Emily sat curled up on her living room couch, a mug of chamomile tea cooling on the coffee table. Her laptop glowed softly, casting shadows across the room as she sketched a logo for a client. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and every so often a branch scraped against the siding like skeletal fingers clawing for entry. She shivered, pulling her sweater tighter. It was just the storm, she told herself, just the storm. But then came the thud. It wasn't loud, not at first. A dull, heavy thump from somewhere above, like a bag of flour dropping onto the roof. Emily froze, her stylus hovering over the tablet. Her heart gave a quick, unsteady lurch. She muted the podcast, the host's voice cutting off mid-sentence about a haunted asylum. Silence flooded the room, broken only by the drumming rain. She waited, straining her ears. Nothing, just the storm playing tricks. "Get a grip, Em," she muttered, forcing a laugh. She'd been listening to too many creepy stories. The house was old, creaky, prone to odd noises. Probably just a branch blown loose by the wind. Still, her pulse refused to slow. She glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Too late for visitors, not that anyone would brave this weather. She lived at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, her nearest neighbor a quarter-mile away. Isolation had been the appeal until now. She tried to focus on her work, but the unease lingered, a cold knot in her stomach. The house felt too big, too empty. She stood, stretching, and decided to make more tea, if only to shake the jitters. As she crossed the living room toward the kitchen, her bare feet padded softly on the hardwood. That's when she noticed it, a tiny, damp smudge on the floor, barely visible in the dim light. She crouched, frowning. It wasn't a footprint, not exactly, just a faint, irregular mark, like someone had stepped there with a wet sock. Her brow furrowed. She hadn't been upstairs in hours, and she was meticulous about keeping the floors clean. Her eyes flicked to the staircase, shrouded in darkness at the far end of the hall. The air felt heavier now, charged like the moment before a lightning strike. She straightened, her breath shallow. "You're being paranoid," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow. She grabbed her phone from the couch, her fingers trembling as she swiped to the flashlight app. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the staircase. Each step seemed to stretch endlessly upward, vanishing into the shadows of the second floor. Emily hesitated. She could stay downstairs, ignore the noise, the smudge, the creeping dread. But what if someone, or something, was up there. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. A burglar, a squatter, or worse, something not entirely human. She shook her head, scolding herself. This wasn't one of her podcasts. This was real life. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. She took a step toward the stairs, then another, her phone's light trembling in her grip. The house groaned under the storm's assault, and every creak made her flinch. Halfway up, she paused, her ears straining. Was that a shuffle? A soft, deliberate movement from the hallway above. Her mouth went dry. She clutched the banister, her knuckles white. "Hello?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer, just the rain pounding like a heartbeat. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before her, dark and silent. Doors lined either side, guest room, bathroom, her office, and at the far end, her bedroom. All were closed, just as she'd left them, but something felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. She crept forward, her flashlight sweeping the walls, catching the glint of a framed photo, her and her sister smiling at last year's 4th of July barbecue. The memory felt distant, unreal. She reached her bedroom door and hesitated. Her hand hovered over the knob, cold metal biting her palm. If someone was in there, this was her last chance to turn back. But curiosity, that dangerous spark, urged her forward. She had to know. She turned the knob, the door creaking open with agonizing slowness. The room was empty, or so it seemed. Her bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn against the storm. The closet door was ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking out. Her flashlight beam danced across the room, lingering on the window. It was closed, locked, just as she'd left it. Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. As she stepped inside, her foot brushed something soft. She aimed the light downward and gasped. A single sock, damp and mud-streaked, lay crumpled on the carpet. It wasn't hers. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She backed away, her breath hitching. Someone had been here. Was here. The thud, the smudge, the sock, it wasn't her imagination. She spun toward the door, ready to bolt, but a faint sound stopped her cold. A soft, deliberate click from the closet. Her blood turned to ice. The door was moving, inching open, the darkness inside swelling like a living thing. Emily didn't think. She ran. Her feet pounded down the stairs, slipping on the last step. She stumbled into the living room, grabbing her phone from where she'd dropped it. Her fingers fumbled as she dialed 911, her eyes locked on the staircase. "Please hurry," she whispered to the operator, her voice shaking. "Someone's in my house." The wait was torture. 5 minutes stretched into eternity, the rain's relentless drumbeat mocking her fear. She hid in the garage, crouched behind her car, clutching a tire iron she'd found on a shelf. Every sound made her jump. The wind, the creak of the house, the distant wail of sirens. Her mind raced with questions. Who was he? How long had he been in her house? What did he want? The thought of him lurking in her bedroom, mere feet from where she slept, made her skin crawl. When the police arrived, their flashlights sliced through the rain-soaked night. Emily let the officer, a grizzled man named Sergeant Malone, into the house, her voice trembling as she recounted the night's events. She waited on the porch, the cold seeping into her bones as Malone searched the house. The storm seemed to hold its breath, the rain softening to a drizzle. 2 minutes later, a shout from upstairs. Emily's stomach dropped. Footsteps echoed, heavy and deliberate, descending the stairs. Malone appeared, his face grim, one hand on his holster, the other gripping the arm of a man in handcuffs. Emily's breath caught. She knew him. It was the man who'd knocked on her door earlier that evening, claiming to need directions. He'd been polite, almost charming, with a boyish smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She'd brushed him off, uneasy but not alarmed. Now his face was a mask of rage, his eyes boring into her as Malone led him to the patrol car. "You should have let me in," he snarled, his voice low and venomous. Emily's legs buckled. She gripped the porch railing, her world tilting. Malone returned, his expression somber. "He was in your bedroom," he said. "Hiding in the closet, had a knife on him." Emily's knees gave out. She sank onto the porch steps, the rain soaking her hair. Malone explained the rest in clipped professional tones. The man, identified as Daniel Reese, a drifter with a history of break-ins, had climbed onto her roof, likely causing the thud she'd heard. He'd pried open a second-story window, one Emily had never thought to secure. Most chillingly, he'd taken off his shoes to avoid leaving prints moving through her house with a predator's precision. The damp sock, the smudge on the floor, they were traces of his silent invasion. "He was watching you," Malone said, his voice softening. "Probably for hours." The words hit like a physical blow. Emily's stomach churned. She pictured him in her bedroom, crouched in the dark, listening to her move through the house. Had he been there when she showered? When she sang off-key to her music? The violation was suffocating, a weight she couldn't shake. The police took Reese away, his curses fading into the night. But the fear stayed. Emily spent the next few weeks in a motel, unable to face her house. She installed new locks, motion sensors, a full security system. But no amount of technology could erase the memory of that night. The thud, the sock, the click of the closet door. She stopped listening to horror podcasts. The real world was scary enough. Months later, she learned more. Reese had targeted her specifically, obsessed after seeing her at a local coffee shop. He'd stalked her for weeks, mapping her routines, testing her vulnerabilities. The judge sentenced him to 7 years, but Emily knew time wouldn't erase the truth. Her home, her sanctuary had been breached. And deep down, she wondered if it ever would feel safe again. Every night as she lay in bed, the rain brought it all back. She'd check the locks, the windows, the closets. She'd listen, heart pounding, for the faintest sound, a thud, a shuffle, a whisper in the dark. And sometimes in the quiet, she swore she could hear it. The soft, deliberate click of a door opening just out of sight. The rain came down in sheets, a gray curtain that turned the streets of Portland, Oregon into a maze of reflections. Lucas Bennett, 34, hunched over his desk in the cramped attic of his rented townhouse, the glow of his computer monitors casting a sickly pallor across his face. A freelance audio engineer, Lucas spent his nights tweaking soundscapes for indie films, his headphones a constant companion. He loved the solitude of his work, the way he could lose himself in layers of sound, until tonight, when the sound found him. Lucas had lived in the townhouse for just over a year, a narrow 3-story relic squeezed between newer condos. The place had character, creaky floors, warped windows, a faint, musty smell that never quite went away. He didn't mind. The rent was cheap and the attic was perfect for his setup. 2 monitors, a mixing board, and a tangle of cables that looked chaotic but made sense to him. The rain, though, was a problem. It seeped into his focus, a relentless pat, pat, pat against the skylight above. He adjusted his headphones, cranking the volume on a dialogue track he was cleaning up. That's when he heard it. A faint, garbled whisper buried in the audio. Lucas paused the track, frowning. He rewound a few seconds and played it again. There it was, a low, guttural sound like someone murmuring just out of earshot. He leaned closer, adjusting the EQ to isolate it. The dialogue was a simple exchange between 2 actors, recorded in a controlled studio. There shouldn't be anything else, but the whisper persisted, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the rain's drone. "Come closer." Lucas yanked off his headphones, his heart stuttering. The attic was silent, save for the storm outside. He glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. The room was empty, his equipment humming softly. He laughed, a shaky sound. "Too much coffee, man," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. He'd been up since dawn, chasing deadlines. His mind was playing tricks. Still, he couldn't shake the chill crawling up his spine. He put the headphones back on, hesitating before hitting play. The dialogue resumed, clear and normal. No whisper. He exhaled, relaxing. Just a glitch, he told himself, or maybe interference from the storm. He worked for another hour, but the unease lingered, a weight in the air. Around 1 a.m., he took a break, heading downstairs for a beer. The townhouse was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps filtering through the rain-streaked windows. As he cracked open a can, he noticed something odd. The living room radio, an old analog thing left by the previous tenant, was on, its dial glowing faintly. Static hissed from the speakers, a low, crackling hum. Lucas frowned. He hadn't touched the radio in months. It was more decoration than functional, its antenna bent and useless. He crossed the room, reaching for the power switch, but froze. The static shifted, forming words. "Lucas, closer." His blood ran cold. The voice was faint, distorted, but unmistakable. It knew his name. He yanked the plug from the wall, the radio falling silent. His hands shook as he backed away, the beer can forgotten on the counter. The rain pounded harder, a roar that seemed to mock him. He checked the locks, front door, back door, windows, all secure. The house was empty. He was alone, wasn't he? Back in the attic, he tried to focus, but the whisper haunted him. He opened the audio file again, scrubbing through it obsessively. Nothing. No trace of the voice. He checked his other projects, old recordings, even his music library. All clean. But when he unplugged his headphones and played the dialogue through the speakers, there it was again. A faint, insidious murmur, weaving through the actors' voices like a parasite. "You can't hide." Lucas slammed the laptop shut, his breath ragged. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't his imagination. Something was here in the house, in the sound. He grabbed his phone, ready to call his friend Mike, a fellow audio nerd who might have answers. But the screen flickered, static crawling across it like a swarm of ants. He dropped the phone, cursing, and that's when the lights dimmed. The attic plunged into near darkness, the monitors casting a ghostly glow. The rain roared, but beneath it a new sound emerged, a soft rhythmic tapping, not from the skylight, but from the walls. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, 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 like someone testing the house's bones, searching for a way in or out. Lucas's mouth went dry. He grabbed a flashlight from his desk drawer, its beam shaky in his grip. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low hum, like feedback from a microphone left too close to a speaker. It was coming from downstairs. He didn't want to go down there. Every instinct screamed to stay put, to barricade the attic door. But the hum grew louder, insistent, pulling him like a hook in his chest. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step a descent into dread. The living room was a void, the street lamp's glow barely penetrating the windows. The radio was still unplugged, but the hum was deafening now, vibrating in his teeth. It wasn't coming from the radio, it was coming from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the air itself. And then he saw it, a shape in the corner where the shadows were thickest. It was humanoid but wrong, too tall, too thin, its limbs bent at unnatural angles. Its head tilted as if listening, and though Lucas couldn't see its face, he felt its gaze, heavy and hungry. The hum spiked, words forming in the static. "You hear me. You belong to me," Lucas screamed, stumbling backward. The shape moved, gliding toward him, its movements jerky like a film skipping frames. He bolted for the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt. The hum was a roar now, drowning out the rain, the words a chant in his skull. Closer. Closer. He flung the door open, the cold rain slapping his face as he ran into the street. He didn't stop until he reached a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, soaked and shivering. The waitress, a kind-eyed woman named Carla, gave him coffee and a towel, listening as he stammered out his story. She didn't laugh, didn't call him crazy. "Old houses," she said softly. "They hold things that don't let go." Lucas never went back to the townhouse. He hired movers to pack his stuff, refusing to step foot inside. The landlord, annoyed but sympathetic, let him break the lease. Mike, his friend, analyzed the audio files later, finding nothing but clean dialogue. The radio, when tested, was broken, its circuits fried. But Lucas knew what he'd heard, what he'd seen. The whisper wasn't just in the static, it was in him. A faint echo that surfaced in quiet moments. He moved to Seattle, started over. He avoids analog radios, keeps his headphones wired, not Bluetooth. But on rainy nights, when the world is drowned in static, he hears it. A faint, guttural murmur calling his name. And sometimes in the dark, he feels it watching, waiting for him to come closer. The rain fell in a steady, mournful rhythm, cloaking the small town of Ashwood, Maine, in a veil of mist. Sarah Coleman, 19, stood at the counter of the town's only gas station, restocking cigarette packs and sneaking glances at her phone. A freshman at the local community college, she worked the graveyard shift to cover tuition, hating every minute of it. The station was a fluorescent-lit purgatory, its windows streaked with rain reflecting the empty parking lot. At 2 a.m., with no customers for hours, the boredom was almost as bad as the creeping loneliness. Sarah had grown up in Ashwood, a sleepy coastal town where nothing ever happened. The gas station, perched on the edge of Route 17, was the kind of place locals avoided after dark. Not because of crime. Ashwood didn't have much of that, but because of the stories. Whispers about the road, the woods, the things that lingered just out of sight. Sarah didn't believe in ghosts. She was practical, grounded, the kind of girl who rolled her eyes at campfire tales. But tonight, with the rain drumming and the station's hum the only sound, those stories felt closer than she'd like. She was scrolling through TikTok when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up, startled. A girl stood in the doorway, maybe 16, drenched from head to toe. Her hair, dark and stringy, clung to her pale face, and her clothes, a faded hoodie and jeans, were soaked through. She didn't move, just stood there, water pooling at her feet. "Hey, you okay?" Sarah called, setting her phone down. The girl didn't answer. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, stared at Sarah with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You need a towel or something? It's pouring out there." The girl tilted her head, a slow, unnatural motion. "Can you help me?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the rain's drum. It was a child's voice, but something about it felt wrong, like it was layered with echoes. Sarah hesitated. The girl looked harmless, but the station's security camera was busted, and her manager's rule echoed in her head. No strays after midnight. Still, she couldn't just leave her standing there. "Sure, come in. I'll grab something to dry you off." She ducked into the back room, grabbing a stack of paper towels. When she returned, the girl was gone. The door was closed, the bell silent. Sarah frowned, stepping outside. The parking lot was empty, the rain swallowing any sign of footprints. "Weird," she muttered, shivering as the cold bit her skin. She locked the door, unease settling in her chest. Back inside, she tried to shake it off. Probably just a kid messing around, she told herself. But as she resumed restocking, she noticed something on the counter. A small, wet handprint, the fingers smudged like they'd been dragged. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't seen the girl touch anything. She wiped it away, her hands unsteady, and checked the clock. 3 hours until her shift ended. She could make it. The rest of the night was quiet, but the station felt different, like the air had thickened. The rain's rhythm seemed to shift, forming patterns that sounded almost like words. Sarah turned on the radio, hoping music would drown it out, but static crackled through every station. She switched it off, her nerves fraying. At 4 a.m., the power flickered. The lights buzzed, dimming for a heartbeat before stabilizing. Sarah's heart raced. She grabbed the baseball bat from under the counter, a gift from her dad just in case. The station was silent, the rain a dull roar. Then she saw it, a reflection in the window. The girl standing outside, her face pressed against the glass. Sarah gasped, the bat slipping from her grip. The girl's eyes were black, not just dark, but empty, like twin voids swallowing the light. Her lips moved, forming words Sarah couldn't hear but felt, a cold whisper in her mind. "Let me in." She stumbled back, knocking over a display of energy drinks. The girl didn't move, her gaze locked on Sarah's. The rain seemed to slow, each drop hanging in the air as if time itself was bending. Sarah's phone buzzed, snapping her out of it. She grabbed it, ready to call 911, but the screen showed a photo she hadn't taken. A blurry image of herself standing at the counter, the girl's reflection in the window behind her. She screamed, dropping the phone. The lights flickered again, and when she looked up, the girl was gone. The window was empty, the parking lot dark. But the door was unlocked, swinging slightly in the wind. Sarah's breath hitched. She hadn't touched the lock. She grabbed the bat and ran to the door, slamming it shut and twisting the deadbolt. Her hands shook as she dialed her manager, then her dad, then 911. No one answered. The rain roared and the station's hum grew louder, a pulse that matched her heartbeat. She backed into the corner, clutching the bat, her eyes darting between the windows. That's when she heard it. A soft, wet footstep behind the counter. She froze, her blood turning to ice. The sound came again, deliberate, closer. She turned, the bat raised, but no one was there. The handprint was back, fresh and dripping, joined by another, smaller one. And then from the back room a giggle, high-pitched, childlike, but laced with something ancient and wrong. Sarah didn't wait. She bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. The footsteps followed, faster now, splashing in the water she hadn't noticed pooling on the floor. She flung the door open and ran into the rain, not stopping until she reached the diner across the highway. The cook, a burly man named Joe, took her in, his face pale as she sobbed out her story. The police searched the station later that morning. They found nothing, no footprints, no handprints, no sign of the girl. The security camera, though broken, had recorded a single frame. Sarah at the counter alone, but with a shadow in the window, too tall, too thin, too wrong to be human. The photo on her phone was gone, deleted without a trace. Sarah quit the job, left Ashwood, moved to Boston. She doesn't work nights anymore, doesn't trust empty places, but on rainy nights when the world is soft and gray, she sees her. The girl in the window, her black eyes watching, her voice a whisper in the rain. You let me in. And Sarah knows deep down that she's still out there waiting for the next lonely soul to answer her call.